narratives continue to seek the truth and aspire to a better life. Iran, by this very name, character, and identity, is one of the oldest continuous civilizations in human history. Despite its historical and geographical advantages at various times, Iran has never in its modern history chosen the path of aggression, expansion, colonialism, or domination. Even after enduring occupation, invasion, and sustained pressure from global powers, and despite possessing military superiority over many of its neighbors, Iran has never initiated a war, yet it has resolutely and bravely repelled those who have attacked it. The Iranian people harbor no enmity toward other nations, including the people of America, Europe, or neighboring countries. Even in the face of repeated foreign interventions and pressure throughout their proud history, Iranians have consistently drawn a clear distinction between governments and the peoples they govern. This is a deeply rooted principle in Iranian culture and collective consciousness, not a temporary political stance. For this reason, portraying Iran as a threat is neither consistent with historical reality nor with present-day observable facts. Such a perception is the product of political and economic whims of the powerful, the need to manufacture an enemy in order to justify pressure, maintain military dominance, sustain the arms industry, and control strategic markets. In such an environment, if a threat does not exist, it is invented. Within this same framework, the United States has concentrated the largest number of its forces, bases, and military capabilities around Iran, a country that, at least since the founding of the United States, has never initiated a war. Recent American aggressions launched from these very bases have demonstrated how threatening such a military presence truly is. Naturally, no country confronted with such conditions would forego strengthening its defensive capabilities. What Iran has done and continues to do is a measured response grounded in legitimate self-defense and by no means an initiation of war or aggression. Relations between Iran and the United States were not originally hostile, and early interactions between the Iranian and American people were not marred with hostility or tension. The turning point, however, was the 1953 coup d'etat, an illegal American intervention aimed at preventing the nationalization of Iran's own resources. That coup distorted and disrupted Iran's democratic process, reinstated dictatorship, and sowed deep distrust among Iranians toward U.S. policies. This distrust deepened further with America's support for the Shah's regime, its backing of Saddam Hussein during the imposed war of the 1980s, the imposition of the longest and most comprehensive sanctions in modern history, and ultimately unprovoked military aggression twice in the midst of negotiations against Iran. Yet all these pressures have failed to weaken Iran. On the contrary, the country has grown stronger in many areas. Literacy rates have tripled from roughly 30% before the Islamic Revolution to over 90% today. Higher education has expanded dramatically. Significant advances have been achieved in modern technology. Healthcare services have improved and infrastructure has developed at a pace and scale incomparable to the past. These are measurable, observable realities that stand independent of fabricated narratives. At the same time, the destructive and inhumane impact of sanctions, war, and aggression on the lives of the resilient Iranian people must not be underestimated. The continuation of military aggression and recent bombings profoundly affect people's lives, attitudes, and perspectives. This reflects a fundamental human truth when war inflicts irreparable harm on lives, homes, cities, and futures. Stay with us. I'll be right back. Well, thanks for staying with us right here at Press TV. I'm going to cross over to Boston and talk to political commentator Daniel Patrick Welch. Thanks so much for being with us. Hopefully you heard the speech or the message by President Pezeshkian. I'd like to get your thoughts about it.
I did. I think it was very calming and reasonable. Sounds like a person who knows history and is sincere about the history of his country and what he believes. My fear is that Americans, by and large, have no inkling of this history at all, and that goes all the way up to the current president, Donald Trump. That people, they are dealing with the moment itself, sort of a what do you call it? A very, very limited scope of vision and attention span. And so these things are all extremely clear and very well stated and absolutely true from a historical and objective perspective. But from the point of view of Americans, it's hard to pierce the veil of that ignorance. It really is.
It's interesting. Hard to pierce the veil of the ignorance. I mean, so how do we get through? How do we give the message, the reality, to the American people? On the one hand, we know from the media inside the country, the mainstream media, and it's basically an arm of propaganda from the U.S. government. So
Yes.
we have that side of things, and the other side is basically that they try to censor independent media. We know we here at Press TV, PressTV.com, of course, was seized by the United States, and they're continually trying to block our message, and so many others. So what is key here? How is it? How can we get through it, others, to the American people to show them the reality?
Yeah, it is. It is very hard, and I think I applaud Press TV for fantastic work in trying to breach this divide, and I contribute to it when I can. I think the more voices you have, the better. And this is changing in the relationship between legacy media and established media and the independent or alternative media, and how individuals in the internet age get their news. But you also have to realize what you're up against. This is not these are not just advertisers or corporations. This is the government and security services. This is people investing enormous amounts of public money in the mechanism of telling a falsehood to the American people. What is going on now is the last ditch effort to impose the full script of the PDAC Project for a New American Century. It was at first written as a concept paper for Bibi Netanyahu when he first came into office in 1996, and was called a Clean Break, Way to Secure the Realm. And this was about a way to smash the existing governments in the Middle East and reestablish control over all those individual countries. And this is exactly to script It's nothing has changed, not even the font, the people, the individuals. I remember fighting against these guys when I was in college. I mean, these same people now, they don't call it PNAC, they call it the Vandenberg Coalition. And it is a reconstitution of all that original think police, the think tanks, the conservative or neoconservatives who destroyed Central and South America on behalf of the American empire, and then moved on to the Middle East. And this is kind of their last gasp. Really, they needed a Trump. And I think it's odd for people, even in the American sphere, and I think also in the international sphere as well. This has very little to do with Trump.
Mm-hmm.
He's a moron, yes. And he was the patsy that they needed. Someone who is on whom they had enormous compromise through the Epstein files and everything else,
Right.
and whose mind they could manipulate, but they needed a patsy who would follow this particular thing. What previous presidents refused to do was to actually, I mean, they've been attacking in non-military ways and some actual military ways for the past 30 years, on and off and on and off with the sanctions, the harassment. It's like bullying a toddler trying to learn to walk or talk after the revolution. But no one was crazy enough or stupid enough to start the actual war. And they got that in Donald Trump. And so I think it's important when people, especially on our side of the Atlantic, that Americans think that, Trump is crazy, and if it weren't for Trump, everything would be fine. That's not true. This is an absolute stolen or copied page from an initiative that started back in 1996, specifically focusing on Iran, and they have been waiting for it that whole time.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting point that you've made, and sometimes definitely there are those who mistaken this for an individual. This is a Trump regime, or Trump is doing this, but it is by design and has been the reality of the American government. Well, since we can remember, especially since the victory of the Iranian Revolution. I think the question at hand basically is that in reality, it's the American people who have to wake up and actually free themselves from the military-industrial complex, from the 1%, the tech billionaires, the Epstein class.
Yes.
And it's actually, the rest of the world is also suffering, obviously. But I think at the crux of the matter, the American people, in some ways, are suffering more than the people in Gaza, because the people in Gaza, the people in Palestine, are aware of the oppressor and they understand their own path. But the American people are just, it just seems so confused or so uninformed, and are being used themselves constantly with their tax dollars and working just nonstop, and just basically taught not to question, but just accept the reality. So your thoughts, I mean, because there are many that are saying now, Iran is not just fighting this war for Iran. Iran is fighting this for the whole world.
I couldn't agree more. I think that is an absolute for people on our side of history and our side of the truth. I think it is an enormous inspiration to see that someone has finally stood up to do something about. And Democrats in this electoral cycle, whatever, can say that it's about to Trump, to his authoritarian tendencies, etc. But for the global South, for all of the oppressed populations around the world, it speaks to the horrific war crimes and crimes against humanity that the empire has been committing in this case, also through the settler colony of Israel in that regard, but also going again back into the to this hemisphere, the entire this same this same playbook was used with Elliot Abrams at the helm, the same guy who founded the Vandenberg coalition, and it's the same people who are populating this thing, and they from using the School of the Americas in Georgia to train with a CIA handbook to train paramilitaries in Central and South America is beyond. I mean, just even before the success of the Iranian Revolution, Pinochet came to power in '73. It's the Sandinistas were fighting all through the '70s and took power finally in 1979, and these they were doing exactly the same things: the death squads, the sanctions, the incredible control of the narrative and of media to get inside people's heads and teach them to dislike the other, to kind of fend off someone who was challenging the narrative as threats to them personally. And it's almost like it's so dumbed down that you can look at the perpetrators, say Donald Trump, against the background of Cap Weinberger or Dick Cheney or the senior George Bush, and then Stephen Miller versus Elliot Abrams. You see like these pinhead kind of marionettes that have inherited this evil playbook and are really bad at it as well, but they don't really know exactly how that all developed. And on the same level, the American public is the same way. It's hard for people to remember. I mean, now 9/11 was 25 years ago.
Right.
It's incredible. This has been a generation of people who have grown up in the culture that is succeeded that horrific tragedy and the wars that resulted, that the empire pursued afterwards, which again were all chapters in that playbook, in the PNAC playbook, that of invading Iraq, invading Afghanistan, Syria, Lebanon, Libya, and finally Iran. This was all planned, and they're so good, and they spend so much time. There's a reason that Bernays is considered to be the father of public relations. This
Indeed.
is
Propaganda, father of propaganda, for sure.
yes. I mean, well, it's
Psychological warfare.
Sigmund Freud's nephew. I mean,
Yeah,
this is like someone
definitely.
who's trained to get inside people's heads
That's right.
and get people to believe something that is the opposite of the truth, or to put them at odds with their own comrades, the people around the world, working people, oppressed people with whom they share all these struggles, and yet they're taught that they are superior. That's where the white supremacy thing all comes in, and that they are healthier, smarter, all the things. And your point that you made about how you feel almost sorry for Americans that are actually oppressed by this, and I think the waking up to it is painful, and so that's why it's so hard to bring about, because people are lulled. They're not just coerced, they're lulled into, as long as gas is under $4 a gallon, as long as you can make rent and make the grocery bill, it's going okay. It's going just barely okay. And that is somehow success.
Mhm.
People have to be
Yeah, I
trained to
can.
feel that.
It's definitely quite. It's quite amazing, and I agree with you. Bernays have done. He did quite a job, and it continues to really affect the
Yes.
American people, the American psyche. I mean, your thoughts. You just talked about basically how they create the opposite in people's minds, and I want to pick up what President Pezeshkian had talked about, and he says, the Iranian people are not enemies to the American people or to any people. People here make a separation between the governments and the people. And all of these years, the Americans have heard in Iran since the revolution saying death to America. And of course, it meant death to that regime, death to the oppression, death to the domination that it wants to have throughout the world. And it made a difference between that and the American people. However, we know how the legacy media continued to demonize Iran and to tell the American people that Iran and the Iranian people are your enemies. And now, all of a sudden, this shock has taken place that people are seeing that it's only Iran that's actually standing up for the oppressed of the world. And it's Iran that is saying, no, enough is enough. And I think this is really shocking much of the American psyche. How do you see it?
Yeah, I agree that it is basically very shocking. I think it's not just in Iran that in my personal experience of having traveled to many countries around the world, I am always um, I feel welcomed by that people really specifically recognize the distinction between the system and the
Right.
people in a way that Americans really don't. Americans think they live in a democracy, actually. A
Yeah,
lot of
they
us.
do.
It's
Yes.
it's crazy
It's,
because
it's
they
my boss.
can't.
I'm so sorry, Daniel. I would love to talk to you some more, but we're out of time because I'm going to have to go for the news. But I appreciate you being with us, and
That's
hopefully
great.
we'll get to talk
Okay,
again. Daniel Patrick Welch, political commentator out of Boston, Massachusetts.
thank
And
you.
thank you, viewers, for staying with us right here, Press TV. Don't go away. I'll be back with the full news bulletin. Stay tuned, please.